Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Tuesday, September the 9th, 2025. Today is California's birthday. I think it is California's 175th birthday. So California became a state on September the 9th, 1850. So yeah, that is 175 years ago that it came into being as a state. So I thought in this video I would look at the horoscope of California. I mean, it makes a break from sort of West European politics. And, you know, there is this question, is it worth looking at the charts of individual states if one is trying to predict an event or perhaps predict a turbulent time? Also today there is a sesquiquadrate between the Sun and Pluto, and this might be of significance, and that is something I will be looking at in this video. But before I look at California, I want to consider the astrology and the I Ching for today, which is Tuesday, September the 9th, 2025. And here is the chart for today, set for noon, New York time. Don't forget to like and subscribe if appropriate. And the moon is very much in Aries. You can see that it is at 12 degrees 56 Aries. So, you know, wherever you are, the moon is in Aries. And so we can say the usual things about this placement. The moon is sort of quite assertive. It has a particular view on the way things should be done. And it aside from being assertive, it's quite quick, the moon in Aries. It sort of responds quickly. And of course, the moon is in a fire sign, and it's starting to make a trine to Venus. So you can see that the moon at 12 degrees Aries is 4 degrees short, 6 degrees, 5 or 6 degrees short of of a trine to Venus, and that's really the main thing to say. The moon does eventually make an opposition to Mars, but that opposition between the moon and Mars isn't exact until tomorrow. So, from a lunar perspective, I would have said that today there isn't necessarily a great deal going on. And when we think about the moon, we think about process, and so it is a link between things. And it's like the way the brain works. I think if I remember rightly, a long time ago I studied cognitive psychology, and there are sort of representations and processes. Representations represent sort of our memories, perhaps, and the processes by which it's all connected. And yeah, there isn't much process except that you've got this trine between the moon and Venus. I mean, it's a pleasant enough aspect. It should facilitate relationships, particularly if you're in the Americas. And it's not necessarily a wonderfully emotional aspect, even though it's moon and Venus, and that's because it's in fire signs. It's not in water signs, and there could be a sense of drama there, but I don't think anything spectacular. Now, the other aspect we've got is a sesquiquadrate between the Sun and Pluto. And so Pluto is at 1 degree 38 Aquarius. The Sun is at 1714 Virgo. Now, this sesquiquadrate between the Sun and Pluto is at the beginning of the day, London time. In fact, if you're in the Americas, this Sun square sesquiquadrate Pluto would be exact yesterday. It would be exact on Monday. But I do think that this Sun sesquiquadrate Pluto does matter. I mean, when you think about Sun sesquiquadrate Pluto, you might think of something that has a drama to it, and there is additionally an intensity there. taking things seriously. And this Sun Pluto semi-square, additionally, it picks up on Uranus, and this is not immediately obvious, but if you see what's going on, Uranus and Pluto are at the moment making a trine aspect. They're not. It's not exactly in trine, but they're pretty close to the trine. Just 10 arc minutes apart. But the Sun is picking up on this Uranus-Pluto trine. So the Sun, we know, is making a sesquiquadrate to Pluto, but the Sun is additionally making a micro aspect to Uranus. It's making a 15-degree series aspect to Uranus. Now you can't see that on the normal regular chart, but if you do a let's say a 12th harmonic chart, so if we look at the 12th harmonic of this, that means we're multiplying all of the planets by 12, and because we're looking at any aspect which is making anything aspect which is in the 30-degree series, so conjunction, quincunx, semisextiles, and whatever. Anything in the 15-degree series will show up as an opposition. So if we look at the 12th harmonic of this chart, there is there is Uranus and Pluto coming together. You can see that. So Uranus and Pluto are pretty close because they're trine. But then there's the Sun. Okay, the Sun might appear to be past Uranus and Pluto by quite a long way. But you have to remember this is a 12th harmonic. Everything gets magnified by 12 by 12. So in fact, at the beginning of the day, this Sun is pretty close to the opposition on the 12th harmonic, between sort of Uranus and, hitting Uranus and Pluto. So it may be sort of late Monday, early Tuesday, the Sun, Uranus, and Pluto really sort of come together. And you might say, well, I've missed it. It's a bit too late, because I do understand. But although this is a video for Tuesday, a lot of people are watching it on Monday. So if you are watching it on Monday, then, do think about this 12th harmonic aspect, Uranus and Pluto and the Sun all linking together. And I think this might have an impact on California, as I'll be discussing later. So now I just want to quickly look at the picture, out east, Australasia, East Asia. And so here is the chart for today for Sydney, Australia, as a representative of Australasia and East Asia. So the moon is earlier in the sign. So the moon is 4 degrees 27 Aries. So maybe right at the beginning of the day, an hour or two after midnight, the moon might be in Pisces, but really the moon is in Aries. And so the main aspect, if you're in Australia, New Zealand, you might pick up on that, on the moon aspecting Neptune, maybe sextile Uranus, or even conjunct with Saturn to an extent. So there may be a slight difference there, maybe some uncertainty regarding Neptune, but then with moon sextile Pluto, there are things you're going to want to do. You might have a sense of your own power and what you want to achieve. And also, if you're in Australia, you're really going to be picking up the Sun sesquiquadrate Pluto. It's going to be really very powerful in Australia. So I think that in Australasia, it's probably going to be a more intense day than it would be if you were in the Americas, for example. And here is the viewpoint from the Sun's perspective, the heliocentric chart. And heliocentrically, Venus is starting to make a conjunction to Jupiter. So over the next few days, Venus will be making that conjunction, and Mercury is now coming in. Mercury is making a sextile to Venus, Mercury making a sextile to Jupiter. And I would have said that those aspects were fairly sort of benign. And, when I looked at the week overall, just from a viewpoint of astrology, I kind of suggested that I didn't think that there was a huge amount going on, at least in terms of the aspects. We've just had the eclipse, the total eclipse, the total full moon eclipse, and we're perhaps still getting over it. But this week, are there any other aspects that we should really be interested in? I don't think so. Of course, that makes my life more difficult, and it would be nice to have something that I could be really dramatic about. But I can't see anything. Well, I've got the Sun sesquiquadrate Pluto to think about, and of course, probably in my next video, I'll be talking about France, because we just had the confidence vote, or we're just about to have the confidence vote. I mean, I don't know what the result is, but that will be interesting, and so that at least covers my video for Wednesday. So heliocentrically, yeah, it does look benign. I think that Venus conjunct Jupiter, the Mercury sextile Venus is quite artistic, quite talented. We can show everyone who we are and what we can do. So Venus conjunct Jupiter, yeah, it's a lucky aspect, and perhaps the universe is telling us what we can do, what is available to us. And the Mars is still kind of trine Jupiter, 3 degrees apart. So it may be that some of us can do sort of useful activity. Good luck might be on our side, but we're going to have to put in the work. It's always the case when you've got Jupiter aspects, or it's usually the case, because if you take things for granted or you assume everything's going to be fine, well, it can be disappointing. So now I'm going to look at things from the viewpoint of the 12 signs. So these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for today, which is Tuesday, September the 9th, 2025. Aries. It should be a fairly straightforward day. You've got the moon moving through your sign, and it's moving towards a trine to Venus. So overall, I would expect, Aries, that things should run fairly smoothly. There's no need to put in too much effort. There's no need to worry about things. And, if you just do things, your way, I can't see any real problems, occurring. And I think, Aries, you do have the capacity to get on, very well with other people. And, part of the reason you're able to get on with people is because you're good company. People are, looking for excitement. They're looking for something to happen. And, moon is in your sign. Venus is in Leo. So that does give you a certain spark, and so don't hold back. And that does put a small amount of pressure on you, because people want to know what's going to happen, what is going to happen, and you're the one to initiate everything. Yeah, so that is a responsibility, but it's not going to be too much effort. Just do your best, and don't think about things too hard. And I think that things should work out pretty well. Now, you can escalate if you want, if you're feeling that things just aren't moving fast enough. You can make things happen out of nowhere. And again, it's not a struggle. It's not like a huge battle. You just have to just be spontaneous and just work with what you have. You don't have to bring in any new material. You don't have to struggle. You just have to look around you, look at your resources, and just leverage everything. And so that might mean that you as just one person can have an influence that is out of all proportion to who you are, and what your limitations as one person actually is. So be positive, be enthusiastic, and additionally, I think that relationships should work pretty well. I mean, the moon is trine Venus, and you can enjoy people's company, and again, that's what everyone wants. So really, Aries, it's a straightforward day. I think it can be a good day, and I don't want to spoil things by saying more than I have to. Taurus, you can feel the influence of a trine between the moon and Venus, especially if you're in the Americas. But if you're not in the Americas, at some stage in the day, maybe late in the day, maybe into tomorrow, you'll start to get the full impact of this moon trine Venus. And it's a trine between the moon and Venus. It's quite a gentle aspect. And Taurus, I don't think that there's any real pressure on you. I think that you're going to be fine if you just stay in one place, do what you're comfortable with. You don't have to reveal anything. You don't have to take any risks. You might perhaps be concerned that you're missing out on some wonderful opportunity, but I think it's unlikely. I really don't think you have to go anywhere. And you certainly don't have to take risks or make an exhibition of yourself. That is unnecessary. And at the same time, you're going to have sort of great feeling of sort of enthusiasm. And you can see this enthusiasm in this chart, but it's a very passive enthusiasm. And so you can see the enthusiasm in the chart. There is this aspect in astrology, this semi-sextile, and when two planets are 30 degrees apart. And you can see that the Sun and Venus are about 30 degrees apart. Not exactly there, but they're close to being 30 degrees apart. They're probably more like 29 degrees apart. And likewise, Venus and Jupiter are about 29 degrees apart. So, what does that mean? Well, it means that Venus is on the Sun-Jupiter midpoint. Of course, Venus is your ruling planet. And so Venus on the Sun-Jupiter midpoint, it's got to be good news. It allows you to be happy and enthusiastic and just confident, but in such a way that, you don't have to do anything. You can be just comfortable where you are, and you should have the inner knowledge that everything in the end is going to be okay, that your timing is great. Now, you might at times feel that you should be doing something, you should be somewhere else, but deep down that's not true. And that there's always a moment when Taurus has to be there, when Taurus has to assert itself, but that moment isn't now. It's some other time. And so Taurus, there's no pressure. You shouldn't feel any pressure. And because of this relaxed approach, I hope it's a relaxed approach. I think that people are going to like you, but you don't have to worry about too many people, because hopefully you can be in a situation where you're only associating with people it's not a time for having to worry about strangers or people sort of just knocking on your door or cold calling you. It's not about that. And so use what you have. Use your existing social resources, without having to take things any further. And yeah, it's as simple as that. And this reflects the fact that today there isn't a great deal going on. Astrologically, it's almost a sort of an empty book. And because there isn't so much going on, because there aren't any sort of major aspects influencing you, it does mean that you have a fair amount of freedom. That there isn't constraint. If there are constraints, or it might just be something subjective. You think there are constraints. You think there are things holding you back. You think there are people who have expectations of you. But in reality, you can largely do what you like. Gemini. I've been just going through the signs. You're the third sign I go through. And the problem I have today is that really it's pretty empty. There isn't much happening. And so you could ask, what is the point? Is there anything that you really need to be worrying about? But I don't think there is. And what is the best way of using today's energies? Well, you could reflect on the total eclipse. And total eclipses are not just one-day wonders. They can last for a couple of weeks. I mean, they can last much longer. Certain total eclipses can last 4 years. I mean, take the total eclipse in 1914, for example. I think there was an eclipse at 29 Leo conjunct Regulus, right on the royal star in 1914. And when Saturn crossed that eclipse degree 4 years later, that's what brought the First World War to an end. And it also, Regulus, the royal star, Saturn restriction, that brought down a number of royal houses in Europe and of course Turkey. So yeah, eclipses can last for 4 years, but I think that this current eclipse probably is not going to last much longer than 2 weeks. And so do reflect on it and think about what was it about. And that eclipse was in Pisces, and Pisces is a sign which is quite high profile, can relate to your career and direction. And so, over the next couple of weeks, really do continue to think about where you are going. What did that eclipse show you? It's very easy, especially if you're a Gemini, to just regard something as being really significant, and you think about it and you think that's great, and you think, well, this is a really meaningful moment, and then the next day you're on to something else, and you've forgotten the moment, you've lost the moment, you've even trashed the moment, and that is not something you should be doing. Really think about the weekend, think about what you were thinking about over the weekend, think about where that eclipse should have been pushing you. And so don't just slack off, and remember the lesson, remember the kind of resolutions and even the kind of hope you are having at the time of the eclipse. I know we don't normally associate total eclipses with hope, but in your case, I think that the way forward was pointed out to you, and so do take that on board, and don't just lose the moment. But as far as today is concerned, I think that you're able to relate to other people pretty well. I think that you're someone who at the moment is pretty sociable. You know how to behave to an extent, but you're not constrained. You're not sort of walking on sort of eggshells here. You're being open about yourself and what you find to be interesting, and people will pay you attention, and this is going to be obvious as the day progresses. So just because, for example, the day starts on a fairly negative, passive note. It's not going to stay like that. So as the day continues, there should be more and more things going on, and it's all optional. Nothing has to happen, but if you want things to happen, and if you're in touch with people, and you're trying to be enthusiastic, I think that approach will be rewarded. And at the same time, Gemini, don't forget who you are, don't forget that eclipse, and don't forget what you do well. And if you do something well, and you do it well, then really give it everything, give it your best shot. And if you show talent and enthusiasm, and you can combine those two, then I think that people are really going to pick up on that. Cancer. Don't slack off, Cancer. There are things that you do need to think about, and you have a responsibility. And you have a responsibility perhaps to be in charge. Not everyone knows what to do. Not everyone knows where they're going. And you, Cancer, can be something of a beacon. It's not easy. It's not easy because it's difficult. It's not easy because there just doesn't seem to be the motivation, at least at first. You have to really try. But if you can try, Cancer, and if you can make a special effort to be in control, because other people are finding it difficult to be in control. No one wants to take responsibility for anything today, and so that responsibility might fall onto you, and you can go about things in a number of different ways. You can be pleasant. I mean, it's great to be pleasant. If there's something you want, something you think people should be doing, then you'll know how to get people together. You'll know what to say. You'll know how to get their interest. And if you need to discuss important topics, for example, whatever those topics might be, I think that you can get everyone's attention. You can force people to listen to you. Well, you don't really have to use force. You just have to do what comes naturally. And this might mean, Cancer, that it could be a good time to be talking about money, because money is a subject that, well, I don't really like talking about it, and I often think when I'm talking about money in these 12 signs, I'm thinking that people aren't really very interested. I mean, I know they might be interested, but I sometimes feel that it's a bit of an obligation. And you can talk about money in such a way that no one gets upset, no one gets offended. So if there has been recently a difficult financial issue, something that you haven't wanted to discuss, and you've been afraid about how people are going to respond, now, with the moon making a trine to Venus, now might be really the time to get it out into the open. I think that no one's going to be offended. People, will just listen to you, and it will be, all sorts of, very natural. And one aspect that you might want to think about, okay, this aspect might be more about tomorrow, but the moon is making a trine to Venus. It's also making a square to Jupiter, and I think you're going to be feeling this moon square Jupiter today, even though it's not exact until tomorrow. But the moon is in Aries. It's square Jupiter in Cancer, and Jupiter is it's obviously in your sign, and I think that that moon Jupiter square does allow you, as I've already indicated, to really be a leader, to have a vision, to present a vision. It may not at first sight seem especially dramatic, but no one else seems to be presenting a vision. No one else has any idea about what needs to be done, but you have that vision, and you also have sort of a basic level of enthusiasm. And it might not be what you want to do. You might prefer to be doing something else, but there is a degree of obligation today. Okay, it does depend on your circumstance. If you're, living alone in the middle of nowhere and you don't care about other people, well, there's still something you need to do. There's still something that relates to your ambitions that you need to get off the ground, that you need to put some energy into, and I think you can do it very well. So Cancer, I think that today can be really good. I think you can be very effective, but you might have to put in a little bit of effort, and at first you might be reluctant, but you'll get over it once you get into the swing of things. Leo, there is a sesquiquadrate between the Sun and Pluto today. Okay, it might have been exact yesterday, but I think that this Sun-Pluto sesquiquadrate, possibly dominates, Monday and Tuesday, and maybe one reason for that is that there isn't much else going on, and so the Sun is, of course, your ruler, and you have a sesquiquadrate with Pluto, and that raises the issue of power and how you're using your power and how you perceive power. And with Sun sesquiquadrate Pluto, you may be of the view that someone else has the power, that it's not you, and you would like more control, but you're just concerned. And the question is, what is it? What exactly are you worried about? And it may be the case that you are indeed dealing with powerful people. Pluto is in Aquarius. Pluto is in your opposite sign. Pluto is quite prominent today because of this aspect between the Sun and Pluto. But you don't want to exaggerate things, and you don't want to take things too seriously. I mean, the Sun is in Virgo, and perhaps a problem with the Sun in Virgo is it overwhelms itself. It just looks at this and looks at that, and it seems to, as far as the Sun in Virgo is concerned, things are hopeless. It's just too much to deal with, and when looking at, for example, a competitive situation, you and someone else, not just someone else, but you and the powers of the universe, or you and a group that you might like to get the better of. It just seems a hopeless struggle. The odds seem to be completely stacked against you. But there's an illusion there. The odds needn't be stacked against you. And what you don't want to do, Leo, is create a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you believe that nothing is going to happen, but you cannot overcome the opposition, well, it's not going to happen, is it? Obviously. So, Leo, really make an effort and go about it in the right way. And that means trying to hold two thoughts together at the same time. On one hand, be very aware of your own power and your relative power compared to other people. And be ambitious. Don't allow yourself to be steamrollered by people who, in actual fact, you could overcome. So that's one way of looking at things. But the other way of looking at things is to have a certain objectivity and distance. If you take things too seriously, and if you worry about them too much, then they're just going to get you down. But instead, today, you have a chance to just let go of some of the things, holding you back. And there could be a spiritual side to things, just being a part of the great ocean, part of the universe. getting a broader perspective. Worrying. It's not about worrying about the minutiae of everyday living, about who has the power, who doesn't have the power. Just let go. And what if you fail? Well, so what if you fail? I mean, it just happens. So if you take that relaxed approach, but at the same time, you are really very, very focused. You decide that you want to be successful. You don't allow anything to hold you back. I mean, there's a bit of a contradiction there, but if you can hold that contradiction together, then, I think that you'll be able to make the most of today, and you can take a situation that seems at best neutral, at worst really going against you. You can take that situation and you can really turn it round. And it's all about your attitude and being relaxed, and also being realistic. And as far as relationships are concerned, if relationships are of interest to you, it's it's a day when the moon is trine Venus. And the moon trine Venus, it is an easygoing aspect. Venus is in your sign, moon is in Aries, and that allows you to to have, yes, a relaxed approach. You're going to be fairly easygoing if you try. Well, you can't really try to be easygoing, but if you're relaxed in the right places, some things you do have to take seriously, but so you have to sort of work out what is appropriate in any particular situation. And if you can take that approach, I think that things do look pretty good today. It's just you've got to be subtle, and you mustn't jump to conclusions, and you must never think that something can't be done because the odds are stacked against you, because that would be untrue. Virgo. Mercury is still in your sign, still very much in your sign. Mercury is getting closer and closer to the sun, though. I mean, I think it's at the end of a week, there's a conjunction between the sun and Mercury. So, although you're well placed, although your brain is very much on good form, it could be that something is starting to distract you with the growing influence of the conjunction between the sun and Mercury. And in other words, the Mercury is slowly moving towards combustion. And so what is distracting you? It is probably your own fears, something that you really shouldn't be worried about, but you're overanalyzing. I mean, that's something that Virgo can do, and you've convinced yourself that you're dealing with a major issue, a major problem, something that requires you to just stop what you're doing, to not push yourself too hard. But I think that you mustn't exaggerate. That is very important, and you must realize that your brain is on good form, and so because your brain is on good form, it doesn't matter what is in front of you. It doesn't matter what you have to come up against. You have every chance of winning through. And additionally, Virgo, the sun is getting quite close to the south node, and that aspect is going to be it's going to be exact tomorrow. But you can still very much feel this. You're starting to feel it, and with the sun moving to a conjunction of the south node in your sign, there is just a possibility that you take yourself vis-a-vis other people just perhaps too seriously. You put yourself first, and there's nothing wrong with self-interest, but in the process, you just ignore what other people are doing, planning, saying, and you try to isolate yourself. And that would not necessarily be fortunate, because things might then be happening behind your back. And there may be processes going on that you absolutely need to be aware of. And if you're not fully interacting with other people, if you're not listening to what they're saying, well, you won't know what's going on until it's too late, and then it will just happen. So something could happen, and then it could be a fait accompli, and you have no more choice because it's done. And so do keep your eyes open. Look for any clues about what another person is planning on doing, and not just another person. It could be an organization. Look at notices. If you see a billboard making an official announcement, read that official announcement. It might impact you. So it just is important that you keep your eyes open. And also, Virgo, don't do yourself down. I mean, I think some Virgos could. They might think that they've worked it all out and they understand their own limits, and there are things that you have at your disposal, but for some reason you're not using them. And if we want to look at today in a really positive light, Virgo, then you have a chance to use things which you have discarded in the past. And if you use them properly, and you have belief in what you're doing, belief in your own knowledge. Maybe if you really know something, you don't even need belief. You just know you've got it right. And if you have that kind of knowledge, and if you really know that you're the expert, then one thing can lead to another thing, and you can do something of very high quality. But you have to give yourself the chance. Libra. The moon continues to move through Aries. It doesn't do a great deal in Aries. Okay, it does make a trine to Venus, but with the moon moving through Aries, Libra, it could be a time when you are aware that you don't have all the cards. You haven't got everything. To an extent, you have to be thinking about, what other people are doing, where other people are going, and you can't assume that you are in complete control. But being a Libra, I think this is something you understand. I mean, Libra is a very sociable sign. Libra is a very sociable sign, and so you have an awareness of the social setup, what's going on, how much power you have. And that can be an important Libran trait, just knowing where the power dynamic actually is. And once you know that, it just becomes much easier. You're not going to do anything stupid. You're not going to push things too far. You're just going to be aware of perhaps what you can get away with. And this is particularly the case now with the moon in Aries. And the moon in Aries does make a trine to make a trine to Venus. And so moon trine Venus, it's a great aspect, especially for you, Libra, because Venus is your ruler. And moon trine Venus is about getting on very well with people. I don't think on an emotional level, but more on a sort of inspirational level, being able to inspire other people, being able to encourage them. And so, you have, plenty of opportunities to, get on with people. And so, don't think that you have to do anything on your own. I mean, if you try to do things on your own, I think in most cases it would just be, unsatisfactory. And existing relationships with moon trine Venus, I would have expected them to really go very well. And to make things even better, Libra, Venus is kind of making a semi-sextile to Jupiter, and it's making a semi-sextile to the Sun. So it's about Venus is 29 degrees from Jupiter. It's 29 degrees from the Sun. So it's halfway between the Sun and Jupiter. So Venus is on the Sun-Jupiter midpoint. So that's a great place for Venus to be. And that can say something about your enthusiasm and your general belief, if you're honest with yourself, that in the end things are going to be okay. And you can be reassuring to yourself, and you can be very reassuring to other people. And that's another reason why, if you're with people in a social situation, I think that you can really get a lot of attention, and people are going to just like your company. You're a good person to have around. Scorpio, you probably feel that there are limits to what you can do. You can't do everything. You can't be in lots of different places at once. And Scorpio, I think that you know what's most important today. You have a strong feeling for your own priorities, and you are able to prioritize. And so, if you think that something is really important, then just do it. And I don't think it's a day when you're going to be overly distracted. So when you sort of get up today, when you address the challenges of today, well, you'll know what needs to be done, and you'll just go and do it. And if you don't get any help, that's fine. If you do get help, that would be great. I think help is probably available in the end. You don't have to regard everything as a solo activity, believing it's just you against you and you against everyone else. It's not like that. But some things are straightforward. You know what needs to be done, and you might be of a view that if you were to enlist anyone's help, well, it would just make things too complicated. So why bother? But at the end of the day, the moon in Aries does start to make a trine to Venus, and this moon trine Venus, it's a useful aspect. I mean, sure, it can be useful as far as getting on with other people is concerned, of relating to them. You'll know what to do, and you're not going to take any missteps. But moon trine Venus might say something about your work and how you're going about things, and you just give the impression of being competent. And because you give the impression of being competent, people are ready to take you more seriously. And, whether they're above or below you in the hierarchy, you just give the impression of knowing what to do without really having to talk about it, and you just get on with it. And so that looks pretty good, and you can do things on your own terms, in such a way that your own interests are looked after. And I'm thinking particularly about your personal interests, like your health and your well-being. That matters as well. And that is perhaps a good reason for doing things in your own way. You know what you can do. You know your limits, and if you work within your limits, you'll be fine. And there's certainly no need to put up with any outside pressure. Although there is a sesquiquadrate between the Sun and Pluto. Now, this sesquiquadrate between the Sun and Pluto, perhaps it was strongest on Monday, maybe Tuesday, but it's around at the beginning of this week. Sun being 135 degrees from Pluto. And so this may say something about you and your broad sense of ambition, and there are things that are important to you. There are things that are very important to you. And perhaps with this Sun sesquiquadrate Pluto at the beginning of this week, you perhaps feel that something really is important, really important. And I'm not saying it's quite a matter of life and death, but it's something that you can't quite get out of your head, and it may have an obsessive quality to it. And because of that, it may be something that you don't necessarily want to talk about. I mean, it may be pressure to talk about it, but sometimes you have to keep quiet, and particularly if this relates to your vision of the future, your ambitions relating to the future. You may feel that if you were to talk about what you wanted to do, then perhaps you wouldn't be taken seriously, or you may be giving away too much. Maybe you'd be weakening your position, and that particularly is the case if you're planning on doing something which is of a competitive nature, or you're worried that someone might frustrate your plans. So there is a place with Sun sesquiquadrate Pluto for keeping things to yourself, but you don't want to exaggerate. You don't want to be just intense for the sake of it. And and today, there is a place for openness. And if you feel that you would like something to happen, then be open and honest about it. And if you are open and honest, then I think the gates will open, and I think that you'll be able to move forward very quickly. Sagittarius. There is today a trine aspect between the moon and Venus. And so this moon-Venus trine is in fire signs. And of course, Sagittarius, you are a fire sign. And so that means that, this trine really sort of gets you going. It provides a spark, it provides you with inspiration, and it just makes things easier for you. Over the last couple of days, and perhaps in the wake of the eclipse, you haven't been quite sure how to go about things. You may have felt that it was, better to err on the side of caution, which is not a typically Sagittarian approach, but it might have been your overall response. And, it's always good to be cautious, but caution, can have its limits. And now that the moon is in Aries, I think that, the immediate phase of the total eclipse is over. And, you can start being more relaxed and being more open about what you want. And it's not a situation where things have to be too heavy. I mean, just be honest. Be a Sagittarian. I think you can finally afford to be a Sagittarian because, with this moon trine Venus, both those planets are making a trine to your sign, to Sagittarius. There's a trine relationship between Venus and Leo and Sagittarius, and of course also moon in Aries. And so, that should allow you to move forward and to be confident that everything will work your way. And so that does look good. And at the same time, you're going to find ways of getting through obstacles. Obstacles can crop up in all sorts of ways. And they may be administrative obstacles. You might want to do something and you might be told, well, you can't do it. It is impossible. There is no way around it. And it might be about code. It might be about law. I mean, I'm not advocating that you break the law, by the way, but sometimes laws can be, or codes or rules can be treated as being too absolute. And just because something is supposedly not possible, or perhaps other people say it's not possible, doesn't mean there isn't a way around it. And perhaps you need to consider other laws, other approaches. And at the moment, Sagittarius, like yesterday, I think I said something similar yesterday, you just have a good understanding of the way customs, codes, rules, laws, the way they all fit together. And you can be very proactive about it. And so if you need to understand how the rules work, you can understand it. Maybe you understand it anyway, or maybe you know who to ask, though you have to be clever about it. You don't want to just assume that you know everything and that you can just steamroller your way through without thinking and without analyzing. But this perhaps is a reminder about the best way of dealing with authority. It's not about confronting authority. It's perhaps about working with authority on its own terms. I think that's something you can do very well. If you'll be able to understand how authority figures, those responsible for carrying out the law, those who are overly influenced by the rules, you'll know how they work. Perhaps you'll just know how bureaucrats and administrators work. And that could give you a distinct advantage. Capricorn. It's probably best not to worry about anything too much. You might feel that there are things that you absolutely must do, but by and large, Capricorn, you're going to be happiest, in your own world, and perhaps there are things you need to do. Perhaps you've been worrying too much about other people, worrying about other people's needs, and now it might just be time to look after yourself. And that approach is absolutely fine. It's reasonable, and additionally, Capricorn, I think that there are matters that need to be worked through in your own way. You don't need anyone else's help, and you have your own view. You understand the facts that matter, and now is a time to be working them out. And as far as who can you trust, well, the people you can trust are the people you already trust. If you trust someone and they've got a good track record, then stick with it. Is it a time for experimenting? I don't think it is. I think that if you deal with new people, new situations, well, you never know what might happen, and you might not yourself be sufficiently relaxed to make the most of the situation, because there is a side to you, Capricorn, that is quite suspicious right now, and particularly suspicious of things that are new. And so if something is new, well, you can explore it later, but I don't think that now is the right time for being particularly adventurous. And also, Capricorn, at the moment, your mind is it's going in interesting directions, and you are thinking about what could go wrong, and you've got quite a vivid imagination, and you're aware of the evil. I mean, that's a strong word, evil. I mean, but evil is all around us. I think that evil is real. I mean, it's not necessarily that people are evil, but there are evil forces out there which people can get caught up in. I mean, that's what I notice. I mean, that's when I notice, what's going on, for example, in the area I'm living in, when I look at people's behavior, when I look at people's motivations, and also people's lack of knowledge. I mean, lack of knowledge in a way is quite evil, because if you have a lack of knowledge, well, you allow bad things to happen. You don't question them, and they do happen. And maybe, Capricorn, you're having these kind of thoughts, quite dark thoughts, but perhaps thoughts that are necessary. and you can't necessarily assume that people and institutions and organizations are acting in good faith. They may be acting in very bad faith. They might claim that they're acting in good faith, that they're acting in everyone's best interest, but they're not. And so that's another reason, Capricorn, why it is perhaps good to have a suspicious mind. People can't necessarily be trusted. People maybe prey to forces they don't understand, but those forces can lead them into doing some pretty unpleasant things. I mean, I'm sorry to go down this path. I mean, it's not that anything is bad for you. It's just that you're kind of aware of what's going on around you. And, as I said, it's good to have knowledge. Knowledge can be painful, but without knowledge, well, anything can happen. There's no way to stop the forces of darkness. But again, I'm sorry, I'm exaggerating. So overall, Capricorn, it's perhaps just a day for reflection. And you had the total eclipse over the last couple of days, and that total eclipse for you may have brought things out into the open. Some of the things it brought out into the open may not always have been especially pleasant. You really didn't want to hear about it. You didn't want to think about it, but you did. And once you can't unknow something. And so that might just be, the whole backdrop to what you're experiencing today. And on a more practical level, there are just things you can do, things you can organize, in your own way. And I don't think it's a day when you have to be at all pressurized. Aquarius. At the moment, Aquarius, you have things you'd like to say, and you can be reasonably effective, but it's going to be difficult to do anything of sort of earth-shattering significance. Even if you have massive realizations, you think something is important, you'd love people to hear about it, but still, it may be difficult to really speak in such a way that people genuinely listen. I mean, people will listen. I mean, they'll listen to some level. They'll listen on a superficial level. And it's all going to be very pleasant. But when things are all very pleasant, you can have your doubts. And perhaps that is perhaps a problem, that things are working on two levels. And you're feeling that, things are very easy on one level, but on another level, they're not being properly explored. And you may be concerned, for example, by another person's, lack of curiosity. People need to know, but some people don't seem to care. And what you don't want to do is also fall into the trap of not being curious. You should be curious about everything. You don't have to take a risk. We're not dealing with a situation like, curiosity killed the Aquarian. It's not like you have to go anywhere and explore something dangerous to sate your curiosity. It's just more about, asking questions, looking at things, having a close look at things, without taking any risks. And while it's true that some people are disappointing, they might also be uptight about something. That really is possible. The Sun is making a sesquiquadrate to Pluto. And, this Sun sesquiquadrate Pluto it's not a very relaxed aspect. And, it does sort of dominate the beginning of a week, sort of Monday and Tuesday. And so with Sun sesquiquadrate Pluto, you just may notice that people are holding back on something, and maybe they're being deliberately trivial, deliberately light-hearted because they're trying to avoid something. And and what are they trying to avoid? And that is an interesting question. And so you have to work out how best to deal with this. I don't think that you yourself are being trivial. I don't think so. It might be easy to get caught up in other people's triviality, but only easy up to a point. I think that you'll know, Aquarius, that some things really are important. And from a mental perspective, you do really at the moment have the capacity to go under the surface and to be able to look at things in many different ways. And as I was saying to Capricorn, there are similarities between Aquarius and Capricorn. There always are, because they're both ruled by Saturn. But like Capricorn, you may be raising questions. You may not be prepared to take things at face value, and you may be prepared to consider the worst possible scenario, or should I say, the worst possible motives. And that's not very nice. That's not very charitable, perhaps. But you have to assume anything. And if you feel that something is wrong, then it probably is wrong. But again, it's not about you. It's not about your particular set of selfish interests. It's not about that. It's just about the overall environment. And it's best to be realistic. And if you know something is wrong, then you can position yourself accordingly. Pisces. Right now, Pisces, you may be paying some attention to, the financial side of things. The moon is in Aries, and so when the moon is in Aries, from a Pisces perspective, it can be a time when you are asking financial questions, when financial matters perhaps are more important than usual, and it's not a bad thing. It allows you to look at the overall situation objectively and to ask yourself, what really needs to be done, and something financial that you perhaps in the past hadn't wanted to bother with, now takes center stage, and you can do something about it. And I think that people are going to be happy to listen and happy to understand your perspective. So if you want to raise a complaint of a financial nature, now might be a good time to do it. You'll be able to get to the point, and you'll be able to do it in a way that is fairly diplomatic. And of course, you're going to be helped by the fact that Saturn is now in Pisces. It's back in your sign. It's kind of like an old friend has returned. That old friend is Saturn, and you are now able to be serious, and you can come over as someone that needs to be listened to, and you can get things together. And so I think that is something very fortunate, and you're not going to make assumptions today. Some people do make assumptions. They think that everything is fine, that they can do what they like. But no, Pisces, you know that things have to be done properly, and you yourself are going to be able to do things properly, and perhaps it will take more time than usual, but it doesn't matter. You'll get the job done. And this is also something that you can transmit. You can come over as being someone who is sensible and responsible, and you can be a good role model. And so Pisces, it's okay to be assertive. It's okay to be a leader. Now that Saturn is in Pisces, people sometimes need a leader like you, And you may not be comfortable in a position of leadership, but if you're prepared to exercise leadership and you're prepared to be very clear what is right and what is wrong, and to set an example, then I think that your approach, will be appreciated. And certainly, what you don't want to do is be a follower. Not today. If you just follow and you don't ask questions, well, that would be kind of just going against your fundamental destiny, and the results would at best be unsatisfactory, or at worst they could be disastrous, because you haven't asked enough questions. And you should be asking questions, and you should be going beyond that. You should be providing a clear set of guidelines, and you understand the guidelines, and you know what's right, and you know what's going to work. And so do believe in yourself, Pisces. And if you believe in yourself, Pisces, then I think everyone else will believe in you. And those are my forecasts for the 12 signs. Briefer than usual, I think, but today, astrologically, there's not a great deal going on. I mean, maybe there is some stuff going on. Maybe it's going to be a hectic, scary Tuesday. But from an astrological point of view, it doesn't seem as if there is much action. So now I'm going to turn to the I Ching, and I ask the question, what is Tuesday going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram number 51, which is thunderbolts. And this kind of contradicts what I just said. I was kind of suggesting that maybe it was a day when not a great deal was going on. But thunderbolts does indicate that, there is stuff going on. And this hexagram is about things happening suddenly, unexpectedly, and there's a great feeling of shock with thunderbolts. It happens out of the blue. We weren't expecting it. We're not ready. And when something happens out of the blue, there's a temptation to panic. We drop everything. We assume the worst. We assume that everything is disastrous. We're going to be consumed by the fire and the drama, and it's just all too much. At least that might be our initial reaction. But what the I Ching tells us about this hexagram is that if we keep our cool, then nothing bad is going to happen. One of the sort of symbols of this hexagram is perhaps of an occupying army. So an army comes into our village and it seems a disaster, but we can just carry on as before, and we can do the normal things, the normal rituals we used to do. It doesn't interfere with us. So it's important, not to panic with this hexagram. Now, we do have two moving lines. We've got the bottom line moves, and so does the third line move. And that bottom line moving, it's certainly about shock. Something happens that we weren't expecting. We can see that the situation is not as straightforward as we thought it was. I mean, this, of course, contradicts what I was suggesting astrologically. When I was doing my forecasts of the 12 signs, and when I was looking at generally what was happening astrologically, not a lot going on. But so this hexagram, the thunderbolt, the drama of thunderbolt, does kind of contradict this. And that bottom line moving is talking about shock, but also relief. It talks about laughing. Why are we laughing? It's the laughter of relief. We realize that things aren't as bad as they seemed, and that actually things are going to be okay. But, we mustn't be too relaxed, because the third line moves as well. And with the third line moving, well, the Wilhelm translation of the I Ching talks about the shock of fate. Something happens. It just seems to be fate. Perhaps we weren't expecting it. And how do we respond? Well, it's just important to move. It's not the shock of fate and then it's a complete disaster. It's just important that we respond. And it does seem that with that third line moving, that something genuinely quite bad might happen. Of course, we have to get this in perspective. It might just be something you're involved with, something you're doing, and something goes wrong, something you're making, something you're creating, and you do it, and it's not working out, and it's a bit of a disaster. Maybe a disaster because you've lost half an hour's work. I mean, it depends. Remember, this is a reading just for today, and so it does appear that something does go wrong, and it's important that you understand what is happening, that you're able to act quickly. You don't just sort of observe it. Oh, things aren't going as well as I thought they would. It's not about that. It's about observing it and then thinking, well, what am I going to do? And if you're able to understand the situation, then the I Ching is saying you have a clear opportunity to get out before it is too late. So, don't panic, but, don't procrastinate. You have a chance to perhaps end something that wasn't working. You were starting to get involved in something, or there was a sudden mishap, and there might be moments of, indecision, but you can't have too much indecision. If you act quickly, you can act before it is too late. And this hexagram, because you've got two moving lines, it does move to a second hexagram, and the hexagram it moves to is hexagram number 62, which is preponderance of the small. And this is in contrast to the previous hexagram. The previous hexagram 51, thunderbolts, was quite dramatic. This hexagram is saying, well, don't do anything. There's nothing much that has to be done. Small steps. You don't overreact. Don't think that you can do major things today, because the overall situation is delicate. But if you don't overburden yourself, if you're not ambitious, you keep to the ground. One of the symbols of this hexagram is sort of a bird, and the bird might want to fly high. It might want to do its sort of Icarus thing, getting too close to the sun. It's not what it's about. It's about staying close to the ground. It's staying close to the nest, and not taking risks. And if you take that approach, I think that things should be okay. And now I want to finish by looking at California. I've never been to California. So I don't really have much of a feel for California, apart from what I watch in the news. And of course, it depends who you listen to, doesn't it? Certainly, if you're on the right, you would regard California as being a complete disaster zone. If you're a progressive, you'd have a different view. I don't know. I've never been there. So here is the chart for California for when it became a state, and I have September the 9th, 1850. Notice there's a time, 9:38. And apparently it was at San Jose in California, and that's apparently that was where the capital was at the time. I think the capital now is Sacramento, isn't it? Is that, I got that right? And so I don't know how exact that 9:38 time is. If you look on the internet, you will see 9:38. There's some astrologer who regards that as being the time. I think, we can assume that sort of California came into being, late morning, perhaps early afternoon, sometime in the middle of the day. So 9:38 is a time that that has been given. And because I don't know California, it's difficult for me to comment on the chart. I mean, it. According to this chart, we have a Moon-Venus conjunction and a Moon in Scorpio. I mean, the Moon is in a pretty terrible place. Moon in Scorpio, the 3 degrees Scorpio is, you could argue, is the worst place that the Moon can be. I mean, it's and so but California. Well, you could argue that California has been a great success. It's a powerful state. It can be its own country, and for many years California was completely iconic. You've got the film industry. I mean, I don't have to tell you about everything about California and the tech industry and Silicon Valley, and so it's been a success. But of course now there is a view that it's all coming apart at the seams, with sort of homelessness and budget issues and wildfires, and it's kind of not working out. Now, I do think that when you're looking at this kind of chart, like at the start of the chart of a nation, the chart of a state, as time unfolds, the chart tends to become stronger. So maybe that Moon in Scorpio wasn't so noticeable at the beginning of statehood, but now 2025, as time goes on, that Moon in Scorpio, Moon conjunct Venus in Scorpio, is being sort of reinforced, and you might argue that Moon in Scorpio has a self-destructive feel to it. When it's under pressure, and it represents something sort of brooding under the surface, but the state has lasted for 175 years, and the Moon may be in Scorpio, but it is conjunct Venus. I think that the Moon-Venus conjunction, it's obviously very sort of emotional. California, is California a particularly emotional state? I mean, I'm being questioning here. I'm not saying necessarily that this chart fits the state. Additionally, we've got the Sun in Virgo. Sun in Virgo. Would I have guessed that Cancer was but California was a Virgo state? I mean, it's a state, perhaps you could say, that Virgo is a state which is Virgo is a sign which can be associated with the left, with socialism. That there have been times when California has been very progressive. I'm not just talking about now. We think about Gavin Newsom, and I'm thinking about, for example, like in a depression. I think it was there was didn't Upton Sinclair stand for governor, and he came quite close, I think, to becoming governor of California, but the machine broke him, the political machine he was up against. But so there is a progressive tradition in California, and workers' rights and so forth, and that might be sort of reflected by the Sun in Virgo. So that is a way of looking at it. And then there is a very close conjunction between Uranus and Pluto, and maybe that Uranus and Pluto says a lot about California and about the myth of California. California as being somewhere that is sort of free and liberal and open, and that it was sort of perfection. I mean, the place everyone wanted to be, California, and that may be the Uranus-Pluto in Aries. Uranus and Pluto is it's revolutionary. Uranus conjunct Pluto, and dramatic, and you can think of, I don't know, San Francisco and Haight-Ashbury and the late 1960s, and of course sort of the darkness of that as well. Maybe the darkness, when you think about the late 1960s in California, you think about Haight-Ashbury and the Summer of Love, but you then, a couple of years later, you think of Charles Manson and Sharon Tate and the murders of the Manson gang, how the whole thing can go dark. And I think that might be how that moon in Scorpio is working. There is a capacity there in California for things to go dark, for that undercurrent to suddenly come into being. And so it's perhaps two sides to a coin. On one hand, you have got Uranus conjunct Pluto, sort of a freedom and the militant freedom. You really want to express something that is transforming and very optimistic. But then it plays against the Moon Venus conjunction in Scorpio, because they are in opposition. It doesn't seem as if they're in opposition, but because Aries opposition Scorpio. But I think that might be a big part of what this chart is about. And so the question is, does this chart work? Can we test this chart? And one of the first big events in California's history was the 1851 fire. So this 1851 fire, it happened just less than a year after statehood. And this is a reminder, when you think about California, you also think about fires, and you also think about earthquakes. And maybe that Uranus-Pluto conjunction is just a reminder that California is in an earthquake zone, and that it's always at risk of these events. Again, maybe that's that moon in Scorpio as well. Suddenly these great tremors, and like the San Francisco earthquake in 1906. So here is the chart of the San Francisco fire of 1851, not to be confused with the San Francisco earthquake. So some sources say it was on May the 4th, but I think, according to Wikipedia, it was very late on May the 3rd of 1851. And if you look at the chart of California, there is some evidence that the chart is working, although you have to remember that because the San Francisco fire happened less than a year after statehood, certain planets are going to be very close to where they were at the time. So at the time of the statehood, Pluto was at 2935, and so Pluto was retrograde. So Pluto continued going retrograde, then it went direct, and then when the fire happened, it was within 4 minutes of itself. So you could say that the San Francisco fire happened on California's Pluto return. You don't necessarily have to wait 248 years for a Pluto return. In this case, you just had to wait a year, less than a year, to get the Pluto return. So it was a Pluto return event for the state, and Saturn was that much closer to Pluto. Additionally, Uranus. So Uranus was in Aries at the time it became a state, but it just clicked into Taurus. So if that time of birth is correct, which I think it is, we can say well, Uranus was opposition California's Venus. It might have been, and it was also opposition California's Moon. So there was a sort of Uranus hitting the Moon Venus that does that does seem to work. And the nodes. Look at the nodes. The north-south node. The north node was at 2923 at the time of the fire. So 2923, Cancer was square the Saturn-Pluto conjunction. So that's the San Francisco fire. Then we got the San Francisco earthquake. I mean, that was perhaps an even more serious event. And the San Francisco earthquake, I don't think was as dramatic astrologically for the California chart as the San Francisco fire. So here is the chart of the San Francisco earthquake on April the 18th, 1906, and as a chart, it's a classic earthquake chart, isn't it? So the midheaven was at 10 degrees Capricorn, so Uranus was exactly on the midheaven. Neptune was pretty close to the IC, and we had a T-square. So Mercury was square Neptune, square Uranus, and so as the midheaven came round to that Uranus-Neptune opposition, and as Mercury triggered it, that's when you had the earthquake. Now, does that link up with the California chart? I have looked at it, and it's not especially dramatic. I think that the sun was at 2735 Aries, so the sun was moving towards the Uranus-Pluto conjunction, but it wasn't. It wasn't exact. Maybe you could argue that true black moon Lilith was opposition to Moon and Venus, but I mean, I think that's not particular. I mean, that's not particularly noteworthy. I mean, if you look hard enough, you're always going to find something. You would be better off looking at Uranus transits and ask, was Uranus transiting anything at the time of the California earthquake? And Uranus was at 8 degrees 29 Capricorn. It was sort of square California's Mars, but it was a few degrees off. So I wouldn't have said that there was an especially dramatic lineup involving California and the earthquake. And sort of more recently, we had the Palisades fire. So the Palisades fire, I think it started the beginning of 2025, January the 7th, 2025. I make it sort of 10:30 a.m. sort of around sort of Malibu in California. So if the California chart were to work, we would have expected the Palisades fire to set something off in the horoscope, and perhaps it does. I mean, this is interesting because at the time of the Palisades fire, true black moon Lilith was at 0 degrees Scorpio. At the time of the California earthquake, true black moon Lilith was at 0 degrees Taurus. So that's interesting that they were almost exactly opposite each other at the time. And so true black moon Lilith, maybe it is working. Maybe we should be looking at true black moon Lilith. And so the Palisades fire, the moon was on the Uranus-Pluto conjunction, pretty close to the Uranus-Pluto conjunction. In fact, that's something else that's interesting. The Palisades fire, the moon was at 2750 Aries. At the California earthquake, the sun was at 2735 Aries. So maybe that Uranus-Pluto conjunction is important, and maybe even the chart of the California earthquake is important as a kind of a symbol of disasters in California. So maybe when the California earthquake chart is hit, that can suggest events in the future. So that's something that want to think about, however far-fetched it might seem. And then look at Mars. Mars at 2930 Cancer is hitting Uranus Pluto. It's about to square Venus. So I think that we've got some evidence here that Uranus Pluto conjunction is really quite important in California's chart. I mean, it may seem like a transpersonal conjunction. It might seem completely removed from everyday material reality, but I think it does matter. And so maybe when we think about California and the chart of California, we should just say Uranus Pluto, late Aries. Maybe that's all we need to look at in the chart. Maybe always need to think about. Though I think that Moon and Scorpio, Moon Venus conjunction in Scorpio, is something that we do need to consider. And so, what is happening in California at the moment? And so here is so going back to California's chart. It had we can cast a solar return for it. Again, I'm not sure that California was really born at 9:38 a.m. The California chart gets a C rating, I think, in the Rodden rating, so it's not confirmed. But I'm just working with 9:38. With 9:38 anyway, just out of convenience. And so the solar return chart for California is this one. So it happened on the Monday. Now, what's kind of interesting about the solar return chart for California is, of course, the Sun is obviously conjunct the Sun, but the Sun is sesquiquadrate Pluto. And I've been going on about this sesquiquadrate Pluto. So Sun sesquiquadrate Pluto is hitting California. And it's hitting California on its birthday. And it's baked into the solar return. So that might say something about the year ahead for California. There may be some dramatic things that California has to take on board. And we had the Palisades fire, and we've had all this sort of criticism of Gavin Newsom. I don't know whether it's fair or not, but he's certainly a hate figure for people on the right. And so that, I know it sounds vague, doesn't it, to say, oh, well, it's going to be a dramatic year for California. Well, it's always a dramatic year for California, but there may be something in particular going on here. So what would the Sun represent? So going back to the state of California, well, assuming California came into being around 9:38 p.m., the Sun may represent the midheaven, may be ruler of the midheaven. It might represent the leader, it might represent the governor. And so if you've got the Sun sesquiquadrate Pluto in the solar return, that might say something about what the governor is doing and how the governor is behaving. And he might sort of take things too far. I mean, that certainly is possible. And I know that there's sort of a little gerrymandering, isn't there? Well, of course, California's gerrymandering in response to Texas gerrymandering. I mean, that's a dreadful thing about the American system. People are creating boundaries between congressional districts to sort of maximize the representation of one party or another. So that's we already got Gavin Newsom doing some or trying to do some gerrymandering, but it may go further than that. It may be something where Gavin Newsom exceeds his power or has to respond to a situation. And talking about Gavin Newsom. Well, Gavin Newsom is here is his horoscope, and Gavin Newsom has Pluto rising. And, an interesting thing about Gavin Newsom is that he has his midheaven at 20 degrees Gemini. I mean, if one is completely unbiased about that, you could say, well, his midheaven is quite close to Donald Trump's sun. And, of course, Donald Trump's sun-moon opposition at 2022, Gemini Sagittarius is right on his midheaven. It's right on his Mars. So Trump's presidency certainly has a powerful impact on Gavin Newsom and how he behaves, and it perhaps will define his chances of being a candidate in 2028. And of course, it's not just he's got Mars on the IC. He's got Pluto rising. So that Mars-Pluto square, really is important for him. And one thing that Gavin Newsom does have in his horoscope, which I think we need to be aware of, and is that Gavin Newsom has the Aries point on his aspecting his Mars-Saturn midpoint. So there is his Mars, there is his Saturn. His Mars-Saturn midpoint is around 15 Aquarius. So that is 45 degrees from the Aries point. So right now, we've got Saturn on the Aries point. We've got Neptune about to go onto the Aries point. And so if Saturn is quite close to his Mars-Saturn midpoint, this is the thing about Gavin Newsom. So let me just show you what I mean with his from the 90-degree dial. And so here's the Aries point for Gavin Newsom, and you see it's aspecting the Mars-Saturn midpoint. So Saturn is on his Mars-Saturn midpoint at the moment. I mean, his Mars-Saturn midpoint is around 1439 Aquarius, and this is pretty much where Saturn is going to be. And additionally, we have a partial eclipse coming up for Gavin Newsom on is it the 21st of September? And this partial eclipse is going to be at the partial eclipse is at 2905 Virgo. So that's reasonably close to his Aries point, and so it's reasonably close to his Mars-Saturn midpoint. So it might be that partial eclipse does affect Gavin Newsom. And of course, Gavin Newsom is the governor of California. If you like, he's the king of California. And so what happens to Gavin Newsom perhaps happens to California as well. So that might indicate some of the trouble that California could be about to face with this Sun-Pluto Sun-Pluto aspect. Additionally, we should not forget that California has a Uranus-Pluto conjunction in its chart, an exact Uranus-Pluto conjunction in Aries. So maybe California is going to be particularly sensitive to the Uranus-Pluto cycle. And, at the moment, there is that's a chart for the Sun-Pluto semisquare. At the moment, we have got an exact Uranus-Pluto trine. So it may be, but because of this Uranus trine, and we shouldn't worry too much about the nature of the aspect. I know trine sounds like a good aspect, but we should perhaps just regard it as an aspect. And so that might be something that we really should be concerned about. And I'm not saying it for sure, and I'm of course, California is a huge state, and just because something bad happens in one part of the state, that doesn't say anything. It doesn't say anything about like the overall destiny of the state. I mean, it's too big for that, and there is one thing about this eclipse. So we just had an eclipse. We had the new moon eclipse. So we're about to have a new moon eclipse. In 2 weeks' time, we have a new moon eclipse. And so here's the eclipse set for September the 21st, 2025. So as I've said, that this eclipse is at 29.5 Virgo, which does the 29 Virgo. It's important because it hits California's Jupiter. California has its Jupiter at 29 Virgo. when it became a state. So this eclipse is on, new moon eclipse is on California's Jupiter. And the precise time of this eclipse, set for Sacramento, which I think is the state capital of California, the midheaven is at 27 Virgo. So what that means is there is a new moon on the midheaven at the time of the eclipse, that new moon eclipse. It really does hit California at the same time as Saturn is on the IC. So I'm thinking that this new moon eclipse on the September the 21st may not be good news for California. And it might be some crisis. It may be a governmental crisis. And we shouldn't forget that this new moon eclipse, it does hit the statehood Jupiter, which is at 29 Virgo. So those are a few thoughts on California. They're a bit sort of random and all over the place, but I think that we should be looking at what's going on in this state, particularly over the next few weeks. And I'm very interested in this new moon eclipse. And this new moon eclipse, I know it's a partial eclipse, and it's not just about California, it's about the whole world. I do think that it's going to be a lot more difficult than this supposedly total eclipse, total full moon eclipse, drama, total eclipse. But no, I think this partial eclipse is more serious, but I'll be talking about that in more detail very soon. So thank you very much for watching this video. If you enjoyed this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I'd be super grateful if you were to subscribe. If you want to buy me a coffee, there's a link in the description, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.